Peace and blessings. Welcome back to the channel once again, where we talk all things health and healing from a holistic perspective. And today will be no different. Today, we're going to talk about the 10 things that could be causing the inflammation in your body. Now, here's what's important about inflammation, because you've heard me speak about inflammation on countless episodes, on countless videos, etc. I'm not just talking about the inflammation in your lower back. I'm not just talking about the inflammation that you get after a workout. I'm talking about the type of inflammation that is a telltale sign telling you that disease is forming in the body. I'm talking about the kind of inflammation that means chronic disease before you even get the diagnosis. So it's really important to understand that the body has a language. It's always speaking to us. And one of those languages is inflammation. Inflammation is the fires in your body. So depending on where that fire is showing up more pronounced, is giving you information that you got to pay attention to, okay? Now, when I talk about inflammation, I'm talking about the inflammation that's in your brain, and we call it a headache. Or in a more severe case, we call it Alzheimer's, okay? I'm talking about the inflammation that's in your gut or your small intestine, and we call it irritable bowel syndrome. Okay, I'm talking about the inflammation that could be in your joints, and we can call that arthritis. Or I'm talking about the inflammation that occurs during, the springtime of the year, and we call it allergic rhinitis. Okay, so it's important to understand that when I say inflammation, I'm talking about a broad subject. I'm not just talking about the inflammation you get after the gym, after a tough workout. I'm talking about the kind of inflammation, again, that if you pay close attention to, it really could serve you in terms of helping you understand what's going on in your body. Because quite often, you go into the doctor and you say, hey, I'm inflamed here. They give you ibuprofen, and send you home. And your inflammation, and I think you know this, isn't because you're deficient in ibuprofen. Okay, so you're not addressing the cause. What you're doing is putting a Band-Aid on the cause. What you're doing is turning off the check engine light. And the more and more we do that, eventually what happens is that sort of whisper like, hey, something's going on here. You get a little inflammation in the gut, and it's telling you, hey, something's going on. You need to change some habit. Think about what you just ate. Think about what you didn't do. Maybe you didn't drink enough water, etc. Like the body's trying to speak to you. So that's really what today is about. And I'm going to give you 10 things that are going to really sort of hit home with a lot of you as we go through them. And some of you, many of these are going to pop up. Okay. So as you start to look at, your lifestyle, what you're going to recognize is that many of these things are really pervasive in our lifestyles, in today's lifestyle. And some of them you're going to think it's impossible to avoid them. But trust me, when you address your lifestyle and you address the thinking patterns around what created that lifestyle, anything is possible. Okay, so without any further ado, let's jump into the 10 things that is probably causing the inflammation in your body. Number one, that sweet tooth, sugar, especially added sugar. Okay, I'm talking about the kind of sugar that isn't naturally in a whole food, bound to fiber, bound to other ingredients. Okay? That is not, the kind of sugar that is added to many of the processed things that you eat, the kind of sugar that they're telling you is healthy because maybe they took it from a plant. But you got to understand, when you remove something from a plant, it is no longer what it used to be. So that's what I mean by when I say added sugar. Sugar is highly inflammatory to the body. As a matter of fact, not only does sugar inflame the body, sugar will actually suppress your immune system if you eat enough of it. Okay, that's how dangerous added sugar is. And so a lot of times what happens is we go on these sugar binges where you're eating a massive amount of sugar, and the first thing you know is energy goes up and then crashes. But the second thing you notice is that you're going to feel a little sore. You're going to wonder where it came from. You didn't even work out that day. It could be coming from the sugar overload in the body. Okay, so hugely important. And understand this. In its most natural form, sugar is glucose. And the whole purpose of the body when it sees sugar, glucose, is to get that sugar primarily into the skeletal muscle, into the muscle to be used for energy. Okay? Now, what's important about that is that when you're consuming something that is unnatural, like most sugars are, and if you read my book, Vegetation Over Medication, I have a chapter that is called The Bitter Truth, where I talk about how dangerous sugars are. And I explain in that chapter that there are over 50 to 75 different names for sugars. So a lot of times, even when you're reading the label, sometimes they're not including the sugars that are actually in the product in the supplement facts. And sometimes when you're reading the label, you think you know what sugar is, but then something else is called something a little different. So it's important to know and understand that even labels are a little bit tricky. So stay away from the sugar, trust me. And if you're eating processed foods, you're eating sugar, okay? Bar none, okay? It's just how it works. So sugar is one of the things, that sweet tooth is probably number one. Even though this list goes in no order, sugar is probably number one when it comes to inflaming the body. As a matter of fact, as I was telling you earlier, whenever you get inflammation in the brain, we call it Alzheimer's. Well, guess what? They call Alzheimer's type 3 diabetes. Okay, so it makes sense. Whenever you're consuming that sugar and it becomes, now your brain, the tissues in your brain become resistant to glucose, okay? So it can't go into the muscle. It's going to inflame that muscle, okay? The same way it would inflame a joint, it will inflame your brain as well too. All right, number 2, seed oils. And I'm gonna keep talking about those this whole year because what's happened is that it's important to know that you're getting 2 types of messaging. And a lot of the messaging that you're getting from the internet, from commercials, even from a lot of people who are in the nutrition space, a lot of the information that you're getting, a lot of that information was created, funded, and, sort of put into our brains by the same companies who are making sugar and seed oils. So a lot of the education that we're receiving, we don't even know that we're receiving it from the very company that benefits from us consuming the seed oil. And that happens a lot. And so it's important for us to know and understand that if we're going to have oils, and the reason why I think this is important is because, we consume oils for nutritional purposes to get healthy fats, because oils are pure fat. It's nothing else. Okay, pure fat. That's it. All right. So when you're consuming your oil, you're consuming pure fat. Now, with that being said, you want to make sure you're consuming healthy fats. All right. And the healthiest fats, or the healthiest way to consume fats, is to consume the whole foods in the form of nuts and seeds and avocados, things of that nature. And, I will have people who will argue with me. I'm sure I'll see you in the comments. But again, in nature, you'll never find a sugar tree. You'll never find a seed oil just running out of the ground or running out of a tree. We have to pull it out. And in most cases, when they refine these oils and they pull these oils out using harsh chemicals, we're also consuming those harsh chemicals as well too. Now, if you want to go get some oil, like I'll give you, for instance, when I was in Italy, I went around all around Italy, and one of the things I would see is like these older women who were literally making avocado oil straight from not avocado oil, but olive oil, straight from the olive. Okay. And that olive oil tastes very different. I mean, very different from what we get when we get it in the bottle. Very different. And so I think that's why I'm making an emphasis on these seed oils, okay? So that is number 2 in terms of inflammation, because again, seed oils are loaded with omega-6s, which are inflammatory. And then on top of that, you add the harsh chemicals to pull the oils out. And then we add high temperature to it. Okay, we heat those oils up. Okay, on the stove or however you cook it, sauteed, fried, etc. This is going to make the oil rancid. Rancid meaning it no longer has any nutritional value, and the fats that were in it are no longer arranged structurally the way they were arranged because of the heat. The same way if I took my hand and put it on a stove like this, my hand would no longer be arranged in the same way anymore. Okay, it's the same thing with those type of oils, especially when you don't get a high temperature oil like an avocado oil, which actually doesn't come from the seed, it comes from the flesh of the fruit, the avocado itself, okay? Hugely important. Number three cause of inflammation is going to be a leaky gut, okay? When your gut becomes leaky, and I'll talk about how it can become leaky in number 4. But when your gut becomes leaky, now these perfectly aligned gap junctions in the stomach that are so aligned that only very, very small things can get through, all right? Those small things being vitamins, minerals, trace elements, amino acids, things of that nature. Only very microscopic things can get through, right? But once they become leaky, now they're loose. Now big things can get across that barrier, and big things are not designed to come across there. And you know what sits right outside of our gut? Our immune system, okay? And as soon as something comes across that gut that should not be there, just think of your immune system like your security system, but on steroids, all right? Your immune system is like your security system with guns, a tank, you know, it's got the Hummer, you know, all bulletproofed out, you know, guns blazing, just sitting right outside of your gut. Like if anything comes across this gut, it's going to be hell to pay. That's your immune system. And as soon as something comes across, there's going to be a lot of fire. And that fire primarily is going to shoot and tag whatever comes across, so that when you consume it again in the future, now they know that it shouldn't be there because they put the tag on it, okay? And when it shows up again, now you're going to have an allergic reaction to it, okay? A food allergy, okay? So this is how a leaky gut leads to inflammation, because as your immune system becomes hyperactive, you know, and overworking, it inflames the body, okay? So it's important to know, like when we have infections, like a flu infection, right? And it's in the lungs. The reason why we have this cytokine storm in the lungs, which inflames all the tissues in the lungs, that's primarily being produced by the immune system, okay? Our own immune system, which is hyperactive, which in a healthy person, the immune system isn't hyperactive. So guess what? They never feel the effects of that infection, okay? And so again, this is what leads to, this leaky gut is what leads to a hyperactive immune system, but it's also what leads to allergies as well, food allergies especially, okay? And this is what leads to the overall systemic inflammation in the body. And what's important to know, this is a really important point, so write this down. If you got inflammation in one part of the body, you definitely got inflammation everywhere. The body works in unison. So just because it shows up someplace with symptoms does not mean that it's localized. If you got inflammation in one place, you got it everywhere. Okay, that's really important to know and understand. All right, so we just talked about the leaky gut. Number 4, let's talk about what often causes that leaky gut. Gluten, especially from today's modern grains. You know, the grains today are not what they were 70 years ago, okay? In the 1950s, the grains got completely hybridized here in the US. And not only did they get hybridized, they later got highly sprayed with pesticides, herbicides, and insecticides, which we'll talk about in a second. But the combination of those two things, the gluten in grains, what people don't know about gluten is gluten causes the leaky gut. It causes those tight junctions to become loose. Gut thou art loose, That's what happens when you eat a lot of grains, because even if you don't have celiac disease, which is, essentially you have a very severe allergy to gluten. Even if you don't have celiac disease, guess what? You probably are intolerant or sensitive to it, and you just don't know it. Okay, but again, the type of grains that are available today are not the grains that our ancestors were eating, so they don't have the problems with grains. They didn't have the problems with grains that we do today. Even when you go to places like Italy, for instance, I'm going to use them as another example. When you go there and the type of grains that they're using, first of all, they're ancient grains, not the grains that we use. And then second of all, they're not highly sprayed with pesticides, herbicides, and insecticides. And what we notice is people can eat more bread there and more pasta there without having as many problems that we have here in the US. Okay? A huge, huge, huge difference. Okay? So just want you to understand that, again, what could be causing your leaky gut and then causing your hyperactive immune system and the allergies could be stemming from you having, too many grains, which has too much gluten in it. Okay. Number 5, toxins in general inflame the body. Okay. And the thing about most toxins is that they're what are called lipophilic. They love fat. So they hide out in fat and cause these fat. It essentially causes the fat to take up all these toxins to sort of pull it out of the system, but they're still causing so much inflammation in the body. And what people don't understand about fat is a living organism. It's a living tissue. It's not just a dead space, okay? So it's creating inflammation all over the body, all right? And so when I say toxins, I'm talking about things like glyphosate, which is a pesticide, and heavy metals and forever chemicals like PFAS. These are the type of things that are ubiquitous in our food supply and our environment, and that we're being constantly exposed to, and it's causing a lot of inflammation in our bodies, and we don't realize it because, again, it's become common. But just because it's common doesn't mean that it's normal. All right. Number six is ultra processed foods. I won't dive too deeply into this, but it's just important to know and understand that when I say ultra processed, it means fast food. And I don't just mean the food that you get from the drive-through window. I also mean the food that you get in box, bag, cans, jars. What you'll notice about a lot of the food today, if you get it in its rawest form, right? In its rawest form, the thing is that it takes much longer to cook, all right? Because it's raw, okay? But when it's processed, all of the fiber and the nutrients has been ripped out of it. Case in for instance, bread. Once you remove all the fiber and the nutrients, all you literally have left over is sugar. Okay? Just sugar is left over. That's why the bread is just white like that. Not only is white because it's bleached, but it's also white because all that is left over is the sugar. No fiber, no minerals, no vitamins there to protect you from just that sugar alone. And it's important to know and understand that in nature, when things are made, they're made in combination, and those combinations and ratios of vitamins and minerals and fiber included, these are the things that are also protective. So nothing is made individually. This is why I say in nature, you won't find a sugar tree or sugar bush. Because again, things come whole, okay? So when you get them separately, you don't get the same benefits. And that's hugely important. This is why ultra processed foods are so dangerous, because they're fast foods. They even dissolve in your mouth faster. Like if you were to eat, let's say some like ancient grain bread, you can't just put it in your mouth and it just dissolves. You got to chew it. You got to eat it, which is important as well too, because chewing stimulates digestive enzymes. Okay? But with this sort of processed version of that food, now you just put it in your mouth, you barely have to chew, you can just swallow. You cannot do that with raw food, okay? It has to be chewed and broken down. And your saliva is part of that process of helping to break that food down. So it's so important to know and understand that eating processed foods, in my opinion, you're not eating food, okay? You're eating something very man-made, and that is very far away from the natural food that we're supposed to be eating, okay? Next thing, dehydration. When you're dehydrated, that can cause you to be inflamed as well too. And part of that is because, guess what? A large majority of the water is used to lubricate the joints, okay? To lubricate in between the vertebrae, okay? We have synovial fluid. What is a large part of synovial fluid is water. So when we become dehydrated, now those little insulating discs between the bone and vertebrae, now that instead of being like this, they're like that. So every time you move and your spine does that, your bone is hitting, okay? As opposed to when you're hydrated, more space to shock absorb, okay? Same thing in the knee, same thing everywhere in the body. Same thing in the shoulder as well too, okay? So it's important to know this is why it's so important to stay hydrated. Not only for that reason, but also when you're dehydrated, now, if you got toxins in your body, they become even more concentrated because there's less water there. Less water, guess what? Blood supply isn't what it needs to be either. The blood becomes thicker. When the blood becomes thicker, any toxicity in the body becomes concentrated, okay? And most toxins are very acidic. And not only are toxins very acidic, but just think about this. When we naturally work out, as we're naturally working out, our bodies are creating something called lactic acid. You've heard of lactic acid buildup. And if you produce too much lactic acid, you could get a cramp, okay? Where your muscle will cramp up, okay? Now, if you're properly hydrating yourself, and especially hydrating yourself with the kind of water that has electrolytes in it, it'll keep that fluid balance in your body. You won't have as much lactic acid, which means that you can perform for a longer period. So it's so important to stay hydrated. Especially, throughout our daily lives, but more especially during activity, especially vigorous activity, okay? So it's really important to understand that dehydration could be leading to your inflammation as well too. You're not drinking enough water. This is why I tell people, you literally need to write down how much water you consume a day. Write it down for at least a week so you can see how much water. Every day, I would say, first thing in the morning, you should be drinking some water, okay? And then by noon, you need to calculate how much water you drink from you awake till noon, because if you haven't drank enough, then you need to be able to adjust, okay? So if you don't do that middle check, you may go the whole day, and then now you're trying to drink all this water before you go to bed. Now you're up all night going to the bathroom, okay? But I highly recommend that for a lot of people, because a lot of people just don't understand how much water they're not drinking, okay? Number eight reason why you're inflamed is because of a lack of healthy fats, okay? You have to have healthy fats in your diet, because healthy fats are full of omega-3s, okay? Healthy fats include seeds, nuts, avocados, but also seaweeds, sea vegetables like algae, and also Irish sea moss, okay? You want to get those healthy fats in your diet, because again, omega-3s equal anti-inflammation, okay? And most people are eating a lot of fat, but they're eating a lot of the wrong fat. They're eating mostly sea oils, okay? Oils that are not loaded with omega-3s, but are loaded with omega-6s, which cause inflammation, okay? So get your healthy fat on. Number 9 reason, vitamin D deficiency. Vitamin D is a potent anti-inflammatory. And when you look at people of color, Black and brown people, our numbers are always in the dumps. 76% of people of color do not have an adequate vitamin D level. 76%. And especially people who are darker skinned like myself, we have to get even more sun than our counterparts because this melanin is blocking some of the sun. That's part of its job, is to help reflect and block some of that sun. Okay? And so it's important to know that you have to be intentional about getting sunshine, especially during the spring and in the summer, so you can build up those vitamin D stores. Because when you are deficient during the months where there's less sun, like the fall and the winter, then there's less opportunity, especially depending on where you live, to be able to go outside and get that sun so that you could be vitamin D efficient and sufficient that will last you throughout the fall and the winter. Okay? All right. So if you haven't checked your vitamin D levels, you most certainly should check your vitamin D levels, especially the active form of vitamin D. And if it's low and not optimized is above 50. Okay? I've seen people with a vitamin D level at 8. And not only is that dangerous from the standpoint of inflammation, but it's also dangerous from the standpoint of your immune system too. Your immune system can't function without vitamin D. Okay? Number 10, the number 10 reason why you're highly affected, not highly affected, but highly inflamed, is because infections, parasites, candida. Again, goes back to your immune system. Goes back to your immune system because when your immune system is hyperactive, it's going to be creating a lot of inflammation in the body. And a lot of times people will have dormant infections. Dormant infection means that an infection that you have in your body, but you have no symptoms. A lot of people have dormant infections where the immune system is constantly being stimulated, constantly hyperactive. And this makes you not only fatigued, but again, it makes you inflamed as well too, because the immune system, when it's hyperactive, will create inflammation. Okay? So you got to make sure you not only eat to live, but you also have to make sure you check on things like, do I have parasites? Do I have candida? Doing detoxes, things of that nature. Okay? And there are signs and symptoms. Go check out my video, signs and symptoms that you need to detox and parasite. Signs and symptoms of parasite. Check out that video. I talk about candida as well too. And a lot of people have candida issues because they love sugar. Okay, so hugely important. I'm gonna give you two bonuses, and then we're gonna get out of here because that was number 10. Another reason why you could be inflamed is because you're chronically stressed. Okay, when you're chronically stressed, you're gonna have a lot of cortisol being produced in the body because that's a stress hormone. And the higher the level of cortisol in the body, the more inflamed you're gonna be. Okay, so being stressed will actually create inflammation in the body too. And remember, I'm not just talking about in your lower back, I'm talking about in your heart too. This is why stress can lead to like a heart attack. It's part of the reason. Okay, so it's hugely important. Cortisol is a stress hormone. Stress hormones stimulate the heart. And if you got too much stress hormone, it overstimulates the heart. So it's just important to understand that even something psychological like mental stress or psychological stress can lead to physical ailments, okay? And then the last bonus one is too much uric acid. I've talked about this in another video, so you can go watch that video. But part of the job of the kidneys is to get rid of uric acid, okay? And when you become hyperuricemic, it's important to know that that's going to affect your blood pressure, that's going to affect your heart, that's going to affect your kidneys, and so many other things, all right? But it's most importantly, it's going to make you inflamed all over your body, okay? So I hope this has been helpful. Again, the solution is in the problem. You're like, Dr. Price, well, you didn't tell us what to do. I did. I told you the problem, and the problem is the solution. We got to get rid of this added sugar, get rid of the seed oils, heal our gut, get rid of the gluten in our diets, okay? One of the things that I always tell people, because I try to not be biased, is that one of the things that works with things like the keto diet is the fact that you're getting rid of a lot of gluten. That's what really works with the keto diet. It's not all that other stuff. All the other stuff is actually why you have, side effects from the keto diet, like keto crotch, okay? So gluten is a huge part of that. That's part of the solution. Detoxification, to get rid of a lot of these toxins, these forever chemicals in the body. Getting rid of the ultra processed foods and eating whole foods. Drinking enough water on a daily basis, getting enough sunshine so that you'll have adequate vitamin D levels, eating healthy fats, doing a detox to get rid of these low-grade infections and parasites and yeast in the body and candida, doing meditation and yoga to get rid of the stress, okay? And all of these things are gonna help with getting rid of more uric acid and making the kidneys more efficient. So again, the solution is in the problem. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you hit that subscribe button, hit that bell button at the top there so that you'll be notified when I have other content come out, and share this so that other people will sort of be informed about, what possibly could be causing inflammation in their life as well too. Until the next time, peace and blessings and Godspeed.